Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, I know that many of you already know this, but if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a YouTube message. The first question for today comes from the Hippo Tail, and it is, do you think that the revolvers need to be rebalanced? With the Desert Eagle in the game now, it almost seems like a pay-to-win if you're using the skill cannons. The Deagle has no trigger delay, a larger magazine, a quicker reload than every revolver in the game, so there is almost no reason to use them now. Well, what it sounds like is that you would like to see a nerf to the Desert Eagle. Like, sure, yes, you could go in and try to rebalance all of the skill cannons out. You could make some small tweaks to the Magnum, the Rex, the SW40 to try to increase their power and put it more in line with the Desert Eagle, but you're changing a lot of things at that point, and you know the more things you change in a video game, the more chances are that you're going to ruin something. And so the easiest way, and probably the way that DICE is going to actually go about it, is to slightly change the Desert Eagle to put it more in line with all of the other skill cannons. And it is going to happen. Like, let's be honest, the Desert Eagle right now, even though I know everyone loves it, I know that everyone adores this weapon, I even love it, I think it's fantastic, but it is just a little bit too good for what it does. Not only that, and you already mentioned this in your question, it is from the Dragon's Teeth DLC, and this being DLC content for someone who's not a premium member or someone who doesn't want to purchase the Dragon's Teeth DLC, they don't fancy the close quarter combat, that infantry gameplay from that expansion pack, they could easily make the argument that this is a pay to win. Granted, it is not a primary weapon, and that's good, because if this was a primary weapon, I think even more people would be, up in arms about this, because if I pay $60 for a video game, a multiplayer experience, but I don't really necessarily have the funds to play, pay another $50 for the premium service, but I still want to play the game and I still enjoy the game, if all of a sudden the DLCs come out and every enemy that I come across is using a primary weapon or really any gun that outperforms the ones that I'm using, that's not going to sit well with me, and that is pay to win, and that is something that we want to avoid in all multiplayer, in all first-person shooters. And so because of that, and that's the biggest reason, honestly, but also simply because the Desert Eagle is just a little bit too good at what it does compared to all the other weapons, I have a feeling in the next patch or the one after that, DICE is going to be going in and making some small tweaks to put it in line with all of the other weapons. The hard thing about these DLCs and bringing in new weapons, while I love that it gives us more guns to play with, it's a hard line for DICE to walk. Like, if they put a gun in there that completely sucks, or let's just say they just introduce a bunch of weapons that are just atrocious and they don't add anything, well, it's like, why did you add the guns in the first place if no one's ever going to use them? So they really have to try and balance them out. They have to make them feel powerful. They need to be like they're a good addition into the game, but at the same time not being blatantly overpowered or more powerful than the other weapons, so it's not a pay to win, but at the same time not making them useless so that there isn't any incentive to buy the expansion packs. It's not easy. I mean, this is what they're paid for. This is, this is how they make their money, but it is a hard line that they do have to walk. The next question comes from Ethan, and it is, what do you think about giving the Riot Shield the ability to be placed down and be a stationary cover? This was something that I was secretly hoping was going to be one way to use the ballistic shield when we first learned about it a couple of months ago. Like, sure, it's great, we can use it to soak up some damage for our teammates, we can be a distraction so that our teammates can push up onto an objective, but how amazing would it be if you just armed an MCOM while you're playing Rush, you then get into a position, place this down, and all of a sudden you now have this great cover where normally you wouldn't have, and you're playing as the support so you can lay down anyone that is trying to disarm that objective. That sounds incredible. Like, that sounds like an upgrade to what we currently have right now with the ballistic shield. Like, honestly, this gadget needs some loving. I recently made a video showcasing and trying to find out why you would ever want to use the gadget, and the only way I could see this being a viable option is if you were playing on Rush, and even if you were playing on Rush, it's a mediocre mediocre gadget at best, because not only do grenades just completely ruin your fun, they blow up the glass in front of you so that if anyone shoots at you, you're gonna die anyways, and if anyone just steps to the left or the right half an inch, your sides are exposed. Like, the width of the ballistic shield is so small that if anyone is just peering just a slight degree from directly in front of you, they're gonna have a clear shot at your side and immediately take you out. Like, the riot shield, for being a defensive item, doesn't feel like much of a defensive item. And so if they went down this route, allowing you to place this down on the ground, I think that would increase the effectiveness tenfold. Or if they just increased the width so that it would actually defend a little bit more around you. Like, there's a lot of ways to make this gadget a little bit better, and I think that yours is a fantastic suggestion. The problem we run into, though, is that the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 may not have the memory capabilities to even have a system like this. DICE has already come out and said that they had a different vision for what they wanted the ballistic shield to be like in Battlefield 4. Like, their original concept was that they were going to have the ballistic shield in your left hand and your pistol in the right hand, so it was more of an offensive defensive type of gadget. But because of the limitations of the memory constraints of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, they just couldn't do that in Battlefield 4. And so, I mean, I'm not a game developer. I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but the fact that they weren't able to have a simple system with a shield in your left hand and a pistol in the right hand, it leads me to believe that this may not even be possible because of the memory constraints of the previous systems. If it's possible, fantastic. If they wanted to do this, I think it would be great. I think that it would make the ballistic shield a hell of a lot more effective and actually be something that people would want to use, but it may simply not be possible because of the memory constraints of the past systems. The next question comes from Austin, and it is, what do you feel about RPG games like Skyrim or Oblivion? Well, I'm a pretty big RPG fanatic. You know, Skyrim was one of my favorites. I recently played or beat Witcher 2 for the second time, Dragon Age games, and while I like Skyrim, I put around 60 hours into it, my biggest problem is that after that 60 hours, I reached this point where I was like, all right, I could go in and I could try and discover a new dungeon. I could go in and try to discover a nook and cranny in the world. And while I love that discovery about the game, it reaches this point where I did all of this stuff, but the world never interacted with me. For example, there was this one town that I came across, and people were dying to vampires. People, you know, their kids were dying, they were getting turned by them, and so I was like, all right, I went out into the forest, I found the vampire cave, slaughtered all of them, killed all of them, went back to the town, and you would have thought everyone would have been thrilled. They'd be like, this is our savior, we're gonna throw a parade, we're gonna give this giant feast in celebration for our savior, it's gonna be amazing, and it's gonna, you know, it's gonna tell its little story based off the action that you just took. Nope. Maybe one guy was like, oh, thanks for solving our vampire problem, here's a couple of gold, and then that's it for that story arc. And so I think my biggest problem with Skyrim is just that the world doesn't interact with you very well, or it doesn't recognize what you did for the world or what you did for the people, and it turned me off from a little bit. I love that it's a great RPG, you can play it however you want, you can be a rogue thief, you can be a big buff brawling soldier, but that is my biggest critique of it. And this is actually what makes me so excited about the next gen role-playing games like Dragon Age, Inquisition, and The Witcher 3, is that it seems that they're going down the more open world path, like The Witcher 3, I cannot wait for that game, but it also seems like they're gonna interact with you more, where you have an influence as to what's going on, and the people around you are gonna recognize you and recognize the actions that you just took, and it's gonna change the story based off of those actions. I can't wait for it. I love RPGs, love Skyrim, but that was my biggest critique. The next question comes from Max, and it is, how would you feel if DICE buffed the flare brightness at range so pilots could see them from the cockpit? This would make the flares useful because it can mark gun runs for the vehicles and would add a more realistic feel to the game. I get this question all of the time. Like, it is clear that a lot of people out there like the idea of having some sort of system in Battlefield where you can throw a flare or you can throw a smoke or something like that indicates to pilots that something needs to be done in this area. It doesn't necessarily indicate exactly exactly what needs to happen in that area because it's just smoke or flares, but at least something needs to happen. You have to remember that Battlefield, while it's a lot more realistic than other first-person shooters out there, it is not a simulator game. And while in a simulator game, this would make absolute sense, in Battlefield, things are constantly changing. Sure, yeah, you may be able to throw your flare off onto a tank, you know, he may stay there for a couple of seconds, but you know tank drivers, they're gonna immediately move after, you know, 30 seconds in one spot. And if one person in the cockpit, they may notice it immediately, and then maybe, yes, they can go in and take it out. But there's a spotting system already in the game. Like, why in the world would you need a flare system to indicate that you need a bomb run? Just spot the enemy, and if the jet has the time, and they're not getting taken out by another jet, or they're not doing the circle jerk up in the sky where they're just doing loop-de-loops, then they're probably gonna go out and try to take out the tank anyways. It just seems like a redundant system at this point. If we were playing a military sim, sure, absolutely. Like, we would want to let the helicopters or the aircraft know where we are, and also let them know where the enemy is, and so throwing a smoke or throwing a flare makes sense in those types of games. But because in Battlefield we already have the spotting mechanic, so it already seems redundant, but because people are always moving around, like the tanks aren't going to sit in the same spot for more than a couple of seconds, your flares aren't going to really give any information to the people up in the sky. Like, the person that you probably wanted them to take out is going to move on, and then it's just going to be this open field with a flare in the middle of it, bringing no tactical advantage to you or anyone else. It just doesn't seem like it would add anything into the game. But yeah, guys, that's about it for today's Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below or by sending me a YouTube message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.